I run marketing like a professional services business.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Revenue Problem Solvers podcast, where we try to crack the code on growing your business by tackling the challenges that keep revenue leaders up at night. I'm Carl Ortmans, and on today's episode, we're going to dive into a topic that is commonly discussed on this podcast, and it's one that I don't know if we have a clear distinction of getting it right. Sales and marketing alignment with a twist. Now, today's podcast is sponsored by the great team at Virtual Causeway. Traditional demand gen is breaking for a lot of teams that we talk to on the Revenue Problem Solvers podcast. So imagine your sales team spending less time chasing and more time closing, because buyers actually know your name before that first call. And that's exactly what Virtual Causeway does. They help B2B companies get found earlier in the buying process by the right people through the right channels and actually influence decisions today. What's the result? Well, it's fewer cold calls, better conversations, and pipeline that actually moves faster. You can visit them at virtualcauseway.com, and don't forget to mention the show for a special rate. Now, my guest today is a 4-time CMO and 2-time published author, Lisa Cole. Now, your sales team is likely sitting on a pile of marketing leads right now and ignoring every single one of them. Now, the problem isn't that marketing isn't generating enough. It's that sales and marketing just don't agree on what a lead even is. That's the argument my guest today has been making for over 25 years, and she also has the hardware to back it up. So Lisa Cole is the only CMO in history to win Forrester's Return on Integration Award twice, once in 2018 and once in 2022. At 2 separate companies and 2 completely different transformations. At Ferro Technologies, she cut the marketing budget in half and drove a 7x increase in lead to sales conversion. And at Huron, her go-to-market alignment work put nearly 50 million into the pipeline in under a year. She's also the author of The Revenue Ramp and the Limitless CMO. She's the current CMO at 2X, where she was also the first ever hire in that role. Oh, and she founded a women's football team, so she definitely knows a thing or two about building from scratch. Lisa, welcome to the podcast, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Appreciate the opportunity. And anytime we talk about marketing and sales alignment for impact, it's been a passion of mine for 25 years.
I love it.
Sadly, it seems like the conversations are fairly consistent with companies.
Yeah, I would agree. And even you talking about the lead, I don't know how many companies I've been with or talked to, and they're like, well, this is what we think a lead is, and this is what another one. So that definition is the problem, is part of the problem, the terminology, etc. So I'm excited for this one. And so as we get kicked off today, I typically ask everybody, what industries or verticals do you work with today? What are your selling motions? What size companies do you work with?
So one, I'm the CMO of 2X. 2X specifically is a go-to-market subscription services company that focuses on B2B orgs. They're mid-market to enterprise orgs. They all experience a complex sale. Basically means that these are the organizations that have a very highly paid sales force, and marketing plays a role in maximizing their productivity, right? There is some sort of demand that gets created. There's a handoff to sales. And the sales then navigates large buying committees, lengthy buying cycles. Me personally, over the last 25 years, I have been exclusively focused on B2B. It has largely been SaaS, tech, then some less sexy industries. Manufacturing is an example. Professional services, a variety of different professional services, from global management consultancies to marketing agencies. So there are a mix in there for sure, but they all had that one thing in common: complex sale. Marketing's not closing the deal, sales not closing the deal without those people interacting with something that marketing's put in the world.
Yeah. And when you get into the role of manufacturing, like I spent some time in that world,
Yeah.
I think it's actually harder to market to those buyers, because I remember talking to, I was working through a project, and I'm a little bit off script, but either way, I remember talking to this engineer that we're working on a project, and I called him and he was like, hey, Carl, what do you need? I'm kind of busy, because engineers don't like to be interrupted, especially in that world. And I said, well, okay, I'm curious, what are you doing? And he's like, well, I'm trying to figure out the math on the 9th axis. And in my mind, I was like, there's a ninth axis. What does that look like? And how do you even figure that out? I was like, okay, so I had to get to it, but they're very skeptical by nature. And I find that they're challenging. So getting something to them where they're actually engaging, that's hard. So anybody in SaaS, you go into manufacturing or into world of, outside of SaaS and you go, oh, this is different and it's harder.
Yeah. Two of
Yeah.
the companies I worked with, they were in one environment that they're effectively targeting quality control R&D functions for companies that build cars and airplanes. So that conversation is exactly like the one you just described. And then the other was effectively selling technology to digital forensics.
Oh,
And so they were effectively helping law enforcement agencies around the world extract data, connect the dots in that data to really figure out
hmm,
what actually happened through the course of a crime and the why.
very
Again,
cool.
highly technical, right? It's all about the data, and that it's definitely there's a precision there for sure.
Yeah. So if
Hard.
you can't tell just even by this little preamble of us, and we're not even at the topic, but why I'm so excited about the conversation with Lisa is for all of these things. So how we got to today's topic is I asked Lisa, like I asked everybody, what's a successful revenue initiative you've led or an existing challenge you've either solved or have solved or are solving today? And with a really fun back and forth chat, it became clear. I was like, all right, here's the topic. It's aligning sales and marketing during a restructure.
Yes.
So the restructure is an interesting point because as you're going through and changing things, I got to think that there's a lot here. So you've walked into brokening, I'll say it this way. You've walked into a broken marketing function multiple times in your career, it seems, and you did it on purpose.
Yes.
What does day one actually look like when you arrive and you look at that maybe misconception or the misalignment, or I don't want to say war. I don't want to say that they're at each other, but you arrive and sales and marketing are not on the same page with each
Right.
other. What
Right.
does day one actually look like for you to try to bring them together?
I think it's important for the audience to know that the reason I've run into these situations intentionally is I really do believe that marketing can be more than an order taking function that makes things look pretty. If
Hmm.
done right, it should be an enabler, an accelerator of growth for the company to do so in a sustainable way, meaning it should help companies sell more faster. And so by design, the very first thing I do is look at the relationship between marketing and sales. But I don't wing it. I have a very structured approach to the way I think about it. How are the leadership and the teams? How do they communicate and collaborate with each other? What goals and objectives do these two functions have? Are they aligned? What terminology are they using? We talked a little bit about the lead a little bit ago, but that's just one of the many words that these two functions might use that could be defined totally different, but it sounds like they're aligned, and they're not when you look under the hood, so to speak. When you look at how demand gets managed all the way through revenue, who does what in the zoo across that entire end-to-end buying journey? Because newsflash, marketing does play a role even after they've handed something off to sales. There's continued interaction with your brand in a number of channels, and that can't be messed up.
Hmm.
So who does what along that buying journey? How how are results measured, tracked, reported, and as you surface actionable insights, whether that's sales reps being in the market or marketing doing market research and talking to customers, how are those insights informing how marketing and sales approaches customers and prospects in the market? I go down that whole checklist.
Hmm.
And I get it, I basically survey both marketing and sales. I actually have a written survey. Everyone gets a version of this survey, a link. It's an anonymous link to the survey. They answer the same set of 20 questions. I capture that across those dimensions I just talked about. And then I compare them in a very scientific way. All the members of the sales organization answered these questions this way. This is how marketing answered these questions. Here's where we're maniacally aligned. Here's where we are wildly off. And oh, by the way, the things that we're aligned on, the things that we both think need to be fixed. And the things that we're off on, One of us thinks it needs to be fixed. The other one thinks it's a wild success story. So how do we bridge that gap? I always start with the data. That survey usually immediately opens everybody's eyes. That's kind of where I start. I mean, I could go on from there, but that survey is my favorite.
That's great. And there's a question that is underneath of this, I think, and hopefully I can ask it, and if
Yeah,
you're okay with it, is
sure.
once you get that, especially when you're restructuring, and a restructure in my mind is change. Like we
Yeah.
have to change things. We have to change the way we do things. So
Very
when you put that out and you say, okay, well, actually, you know what? These two teams, for sake of simple conversation, of the 20, we have 5 that they're 100% aligned on what the terminology is. Great. I'll live with that. I'll carry on. But then there's those other 15 that maybe they're not. How do you actually then approach bridging that gap between, look, this is where we're here, we need to get to here, and how do you start that journey just to start to transform the terminology?
I first actually take the things that we're not aligned on and plot it against a simple quadrant, high impact, low impact, high effort, low effort. And the things that would be very impactful to the business and require low effort, quick wins, let's actually roll up our sleeves and tackle that. Let's get aligned on that piece. There's likely a body of work associated with each one of these that you'd actually have to plan and execute to do that. For example, let's say that we are not aligned on the definition of a lead, right?
Mhm.
And with that, we need to tackle that. Okay, the body of work there is it's a workshop where I'm going to take you through a list of questions and we're really going to clarify the definition of lead that nobody can deny. I'm going to ask sales, and then we're going to crystallize that, document a service level agreement, and then under that, we'll go fix the infrastructure that would enable us to manage demand in a way that feels consistent with the definition as established by sales. One thing you notice here, I don't ask marketing the definition of a lead ever.
How come?
Because if sales doesn't agree with it, they're not going to follow up with it anyways. You can ignore it. What's the point of producing or delivering anything that's just going to get ignored and, oh, by the way, upset the recipient?
Mhm.
Marketing's going to have a point of view of the market that we should be focused on, how we should be thinking about positioning and messaging. They'll even, think they can come up with a strategy in terms of when somebody engages with this topic or these assets, it feels like a meaningful engagement that indicative of somebody that's kind of in an active buying cycle. But at the end of the day, if we can't get sales aligned on what is worthy of their pursuit, whether it's the framework around, the right company, right person, right activity, right level of engagement, or even just the right information that would warrant, set them up for success, they're going to ignore it. And
Mhm.
that's the thing that's not changed for 20 years. Now, there might be things that they say don't meet their requirements, and then marketing is going to have to come up with a plan for how to handle those so that those don't get wasted. But I don't ask marketing. I'll let them observe so that they can hear all the dialogue through the questions, but I do not let them talk.
That's an interesting way of going about it.
Yeah.
I've through Pavilion, I've gone through CMO school and CRO school and some others. But Andrea Kale, who's now a CRO, but she was a CMO when she made the presentation. But she always talked about this or not always, but in the course she talked about when she looked at her marketing team, they were all celebrating, and she was like, "Oh, great, we generated this many MQLs." And then she looked at the sales floor, and they all missed their number, and she was like, "Okay." Like, why is marketing celebrating and sales is not? What's the gap here? And as I think she said, like, I could turn up the dials and just push through more MQLs because we determine them to be ready.
Yeah.
So there is the question there is, how do you start to build that workshop? Like, what levels do you bring in to try to generate that consistent messaging? Because it's a problem. You and I, like, even before we even got on to start a recording, we had a really good conversation about what a lead actually is and who's involved in it and how do you reinforce it. So if you take us back into, all right, we're going for a restructure, we need to have these definitions, and we're just picking on lead for this
Yeah, of course.
situation,
That's an
but now
example.
we have a workshop. Who's involved in that workshop, and then how do you either then take it to roll it out, and then after that is like, how do you monitor or measure it?
I'm going to take a percentage, representatives from the sales organization in particular, and I will go and make sure I have representatives from every functional level, from every org level. So the head of sales, one or two VPs, if there are directors that lead smaller teams, sales reps, and then if there are any SDRs, I'll go through and I'll get like a collection. The collection I want those that are the most credible to their peers in the org.
Hmm.
Basically. And the reason I manage it this way is I think people at different levels of a sales organization or go-to-market organization, they have a different lens. And so you want the different lens in terms of, you want that to influence what is qualified and sales ready. The reason I pick the credible voices is you want whatever is rolled out, you want those most credible voices in the organization saying, I was consulted on this, I agree with this is what the source of truth in terms of what's worthy of your time. And they're oftentimes also, because they're credible, they're usually credible because they were successful. So if I can get that, and it can be anywhere from 12 to 24 people in that workshop. Again, like 2 from each layer, and you kind of do the math. And then if you need to add any other, important influencers that maybe aren't 2 across those layers, you can kind of do it that way. I will then invite observers. And so I will include critical stakeholders from marketing and IT and customer success to observe. So if it's virtual, they're online and listening. If it's in person, I'll invite 1 or 2 from each one of those functions to join in person. They're in the back of the room, and their job is to observe the dynamics and the different feedback you get from the different stakeholders. And it's so that they can actually hear candidly what leads to success and what are the things that drag down on sales productivity. And sometimes it's surprising to them. For example, sometimes sales actually completely agrees with marketing's definition of a lead, but they're not getting enough information to act on it.
In terms of like the record that's showing up,
or the record, the background information in terms of what the person might have engaged with, consumed, something that would support a quality sales conversation. They're not getting enough background on what's happening, or it requires 12 clicks for them to get all that information. And if you're a marketer and you hear that, think, okay, we're actually aligned. I just need to actually improve the experience, to streamline it, and package it a different way so that they'll actually do something with it.
So what role does like enablement or RevOps have as part of this?
They're involved as well. Now, there's a translation of this into the enabling infrastructure. That's where RevOps plays a critical role for sure.
And do they have a seat at the table to say, hey, sake of conversation, hey, Lisa, actually what you're asking for, it goes through this workflow and it has this and it has this and it has this, and this is where it breaks? Like, is that the input that they get?
That's usually number one. When I run through that list, they're usually, if there is a RevOps function, they have a seat at the table. If there isn't, the IT, there's usually a team that kind of manages the infrastructure for, let's say, Salesforce is an example.
Right.
That team will be in that room. They're consulted not during the definition of the lead, but once you get aligned on what is qualified and sales ready for a sales rep to pursue, the second half of that conversation is saying, okay, now who's going to do what in the zoo along this entire end-to-end journey? So marketing is going to do this. These are the information requirements. This is how it gets passed over to you. If we give you something that looks like what you think is great, that's super great. You already told us what great looks like. What can we expect from you in return? And that leads to, it could be new fields that are created in Salesforce. It could be a different notification process. It could be a different assignment and routing process. It could be different dashboards to provide visibility to records that maybe have aged by a couple days. Like, that's where that part of the conversation becomes super important, because it bridges the gap between business requirements for any of the changes that we uncover through this conversation with current state. So they're key in that. Yeah.
when you, so I'm sort of jumping ahead. So we have that conversation. Everybody's aligned in the room. Okay, RevOps, you got your marching orders. Enablement, you got your marching orders. What does that translation layer? So you've defined it, but now you have to translate it and reinforce. How do those two components come back to you and the sales leader to showcase that, hey, we are aligned now?
Yeah. Well, the very first thing is in the book that I mentioned. Well, you mentioned earlier, Revenue Ramp.
Mm-hmm.
There's a section, RAMP. They all stand for certain sections. One is review, and that's that survey. The second is align, and this is kind of that the workshop, the documenting of new requirements, kind of translating that into who needs to do what to be able to kind of execute against the promise that comes out of that conversation. Then
Is
there's
M
mobilize.
measure?
Yeah, no, well, of course, measure. That's actually
Oh,
part of it, right? So
okay.
when you come out of that workshop, what you effectively have is all the definitions that you need, a clear understanding of how records get handled, who gets notified, how they get assigned. You'll also get aligned on, well, how do we measure the whether or not these new definitions are working? And so it includes a set of conversion, velocity, accept, reject. It includes a set of metrics to monitor whether or not this updated requirements actually is moving things in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the mobilize piece, this is effectively where everyone's actually putting this stuff into practice, right? So making necessary changes in all of the systems to be able to identify these records and then manage them appropriately. It could be investing in some data enrichment to kind of round out what is going to be handed to sales. It could be building the reports and dashboards so that you can kind of monitor the flow kind of from marketing to sales and even through customer success. Once that's live, the way it actually works from there is that you agree that that same group now becomes your lead council, and you meet every quarter and you review a sample set of those leads, again, whatever you call them. You take a few of those that did convert and effectively manage. You take those that maybe were ignored, dropped, mishandled, closed, lost, whatever that might be, and you test it and say, okay, was this the right thing for us to do? Do we need to make adjustments? And that's what keeps it living and breathing. The second thing you do is on a quarterly basis, you also rerun that survey, that
Oh,
survey. So you come back and say, okay, now we were all misaligned on these three topics. How are you all feeling now
mm-hmm.
that we've gotten alignment on these pieces? We've put it into practice. We're checking in with it. Are you feeling better about whether or not we're on the same page? And you just keep measuring and monitoring that. It's like a 3-minute survey. It's a super simple Survey Monkey 20-question thing,
Oh yeah.
but it's not a one and done. Both of those things are not one and done.
So if I heard it, review, align,
Yep.
mobilize. Is
Yep.
it mobilize? And
Mobilize.
then what's the P? Is it
Propel.
progress?
Propel. Propel.
Propel.
So you kind of scale it from there. For marketing, what that looks like is that now you can actually there's an underlying piece here that you kind of slow down investments while you're getting the engine fixed, and then you actually move the money back into the programs to scale it.
Hmm.
So you propel it forward. The other part of Propel includes marketing, investing, and sales enablement.
Awesome. The thing you just said there, the Propel side, makes me think of there's a gentleman who I got the chance to work with, and he was in RevOps, and he said, you want to know if something's working? Turn it off. See if anybody raises their hand or freaks out. And if they do, tell me why. Tell me what's going on, and then I know.
Yeah, yeah,
Which is
100%. Well, that's what I do with marketing programs when I first arrive. If it's clear that there's misalignment, I'll scale it down or turn it off, and see if it actually mattered to anyone.
so going, which is great. So let's maybe dig in there a little bit. So does it actually matter? We've got some so now you got the information around the alignment or misalignment. You run that workshop to try to get clarity for the future.
Yeah.
Then how do you know where those quick wins are, especially during a restructure. Because if it's a restructure, I'll say it this way, maybe it's a good way to say it. When it's a restructure, there's people have their backs up of like, what's happening? Do you know something? Do you know something?
Yeah.
What don't I know? What, like, there's a little bit of unsettled waters. So how do you settle the waters, show some quick wins to try to bridge those two teams together?
Well, a couple things to know. What we didn't talk about was the marketing transformation piece of this, right?
Uh-huh.
We talked about marketing and sales alignment, but those scenarios where I have intentionally run into these fundamentally broken marketing functions as part of a broader business restructuring, normally the business restructuring is stated, there's a stated purpose behind it. It could be cost cutting, cost savings, the company's not demonstrating that it can accelerate growth sustainably. Or it could be, hey, we want to build the next best version of us, the next growth engine. And so we have to shore up our legacy business to be able to invest some in what we think will be a growth engine, new product offerings, new capabilities. And with that, we need to reposition the org from being perceived as one thing to being perceived as something else. In those scenarios, when there's a stated strategic initiative, whatever that is, whatever that, it turns into a mandate for the marketing team. I am usually brought in those moments where the mandate is marketing is currently a bloated, disjointed, order taking, make things look pretty function. And it, number one, need to get the costs under control. And we need to shift marketing's, enable marketing to execute on this new mandate. It could be repositioning a new brand. It could be scaling up pipeline impact, right? It could be a number of things. But through that, there usually is part of that broader business transformation, there's a shift in priorities. And so I actually have to come into the marketing function and say, this is the mandate. Underneath those mandates, these are the capabilities we need.
Mhm.
With those capabilities, what work do we have today? And we evaluate it. What should we stop? What should we continue? And what do we need to start doing? And of those, I then look at the organization to see whether or not we have those capabilities and whether or not they should be in-house, outsourced, or even fully automated. That is usually the moment that freaks people out because now we're having a conversation about the work that marketing does and marketing's role in the business, the work that marketing does, and how it gets it done. Outside of marketing, it's funny to hear that many non-marketers have a perspective on what marketing should be doing
Yeah.
and how they should be doing it. And so there's a lot of stakeholder management to kind of reset and say marketing's role in the business and part of this broader business restructuring is this. To do that, I've got to free up capacity. That could be free up budget dollars. That could be free up capacity within my team. It could be free up, focus and energy. It could be a number of things, but I actually have to stop doing some stuff to be able to invest in other stuff that will be higher impact. And so there is that stakeholder management within marketing. What that looks like is who's doing what in the zoo related to that work that we need to go and do, who's capable of doing what changes need to happen through that. And then it usually, for me, will lead to a redefined operating model. This is marketing's role in the business. These are our mandates. This is what we're going to continue doing. This is what we're going to stop doing. These are the things that we need to start doing. And here's how we're going to get it done. This stuff's going to be in-house. This stuff we're going to leverage outsource, and here are the reasons for that. And it could be a variety of things like specialist expertise or lower cost offshore model, whatever that could be. And here's some stuff that should have been automated a long time ago that we're going to now go and apply AI to get this stuff done at scale to free up my in-house resources to do higher impact work. That piece usually creates tension amongst the team because they're wondering, do I have a role in the future? What does my work look like? It also freaks out the stakeholders in other functions because they're so used to their people being their people the doers of their things. And so you almost even have to kind of educate them on, hey, this person's still here, but their body of work is going to be this, not this. And when you have a request, it's going to come in this way, and we're going to manage it this way, versus you just call Anne and she's going to just turn and drop everything and do your thing today. So it's definitely, you have to go through the redefining that operating model and communicating it. And as long as you're anchored to the business strategy and what the business is trying to do, senior leaders will always be team one. They'll care about the business, and they'll respect and understand changes that need to happen in the operating model. So that's where people tend to freak out, is the way things get done changes in a meaningful way. And through that, they're wondering, is my ability to be successful going to be impacted? If you're outside marketing, inside marketing, am I still going to have a seat on the bus? If so, what work am I going to do? Who am I going to be working with more closely? They'll see that the whole engine kind of gets reimagined. Now, where it gets really complicated is if it is a true business restructuring, that basically means all functional groups are changing at the same time.
Right.
So everyone's individual buses, the seats are moving around in everyone's bus. And one of the transformations you and I talked about that was, in my opinion, the most impactful, where marketing really did change its role in the business and was able to demonstrate a meaningful impact. I partnered with the head of product and the head of sales, and we were comparing notes on how we were reimagining our functions together.
Right.
It was a global organization. We were changing which regions we were going to operate in, which states or countries, what level of resources were going to be in each one of the countries, which industries we were going to focus on versus those that we were not. And we had to bring our pieces together, because if sales went and said Japan was no longer priority, or product basically said there isn't growth to be had in Germany, sales should not be hiring more people in Germany and scaling down Japan if Japan's a growth market. And marketing shouldn't have 1 million field marketers in Germany if that's not where the growth is going to come from. So product, marketing, and sales kind of have to at least compare notes along the way as they're shaping their picture. So that's the critical piece, I think.
I really like that you called that out, because it putting the focus in the right places is important.
Yeah.
There is a little bit, what I've seen in my experience is there is a relevancy versus recency conversation that happens with that. Well, why are we going to Germany, Lisa? Well, I just lost a deal. Okay, but did you realize that Germany represents 28% of our entire ACV? Plus, we have the biggest growth there. Plus, our average, like, you almost have to break some of those mindset rules of like, oh, it's never going to work. And then you go, well, actually, let me show you the data behind it. And I think you led with the data, but that relevancy versus recency conversation is one of the important things as you're putting it together. I got to think.
Yeah, 100%. By the way, marketing and sales, this is where some misalignment shows up in different ways than a lead, right? Sales has one-to-one interactions with customers and prospects, but they may not have the collective understanding of how the markets are shifting. They don't have market data. They have data points of one. And so that recency thing is likely heavily influencing their picture of where we should be, where we should play, how we win, versus when you take a look at the market, product marketing, really good product marketing is going to have an understanding of what's happening in the market, how needs are shifting, and where that revenue will need to come from, where we need to play, and where we can win. If you start with that picture, and product is then going to go ahead and make changes to the capabilities that they've developed to bring to market based on that data, and sales has sales coverage where the market demand will be, then marketing can then, within that aligned product sales picture, can then say, okay, I'm going to treat marketing dollars like investments. I'm going to focus it on these markets, these companies, these buyers, buying influencers within these this footprint at this level of intensity, and I only have so much peanut butter and it can't be spread too thin. I'm going to go, for me, one of those scenarios, I basically said I have this much in marketing budget. There are 19 countries, and in those 19 countries, 7 different languages are spoken. And so when you think about that as peanut butter, every campaign, every asset, everything then needs to get localized and translated. The peanut butter starts spreading really thin.
Mm-hmm.
So I established basically a formula that basically said, where does 80% of our revenue need to come from?
Mm-hmm.
And what does that concentration look like? Recognizing how much, the costs associated with really activating in the market, given the complexities of the X number of languages and customer base. So then I gave that kind of point of view of 80% of the revenue is going to come from these 19 countries with these 7 languages. And these are the 2 industry sectors I can cover effectively, give it to product and sales. If they disagree, then it's a matter of saying, okay, I only have it. So either marketing needs more peanut butter, or we're going to have to figure out how to, get aligned on where we should play together.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because it's only so thin you can go with before you have no impact. So, yeah.
Oh, that's good. So I remember, I'll go, what you made me think of is one of the people that I thought was incredible was, her name's Linda Crawford. And so when I was at Salesforce, she was I think at the time she was the SVP of sales and sales strategy and productivity.
Yeah.
And she gave a presentation to us and she was talking, and I thought it was one of the most impactful conversations that I can remember, because I remember her going, well, the places we're going to go, like when you start to look at the currency, well, Germany's currency has done this and they've done this and blah, blah, blah. And so there's an involvement there. And then you look at, and so what I took from that is like, okay, you're not just looking at like, what is the total addressable market? You're looking at what are the financial implications of going here? And what does this look like? You're looking at it much more deeply than anything I've ever heard. And I was a little earlier in my career, but that really stuck out to me. And everything you're just saying right now it takes me back to that moment to say, okay, in order for us to go here, this is what it's going to take. Oh, by the way, if we're going to hire in the German market in Germany, we got to go through the German consulate, and we've got different rules. And by the way, the reporting, this is one of the things that was interesting, is you can't show the reporting levels of what is visible and what isn't visible, and how do we handle that, because we're a transparent company. So all of these things coming together as you start to produce into a new market, and not everybody knows those things.
Yeah. By the way, when marketers aspire to be a CMO, all of those complexities are not the things that we're provided as we grow up into becoming a CMO. We find ourselves in environments like, oh, I'm going to have to pitch 7 times some organizational changes I need to make to the German Works Council. Like 7 times just for changes of title or scope changes. But to go back to it, what the book I'm about to release, it gets released next week, is called The Limitless CMO. And it's really predicated on 3 different levers that marketing leaders can pull. The first of which is what you're describing, running marketing like a business. So I think you said it was Linda, right? Yeah. Linda almost seemed like she was talking about, she has an investment portfolio, and she's got to make decisions on where to invest her resources, whether it's budget dollars, people, program, whatever that might be. She's going to make some investment decisions in the best interest of the business. Mm-hmm. And so for me, the way that has always translated is marketing. I run marketing like a professional services business. If you ever talk to someone that's led a professional services business, you'll recognize that they look at all of their resources, people, budget, technology, and they focus it on high impact work. Or billable work is probably the best way to kind of call that out. High impact billable work, anything that is low value, low impact, or non-billable work, they continuously manage that out of the portfolio to ensure that the business is profitable. If you run marketing like a business, you have a very similar lens. There's a strategy, the business has its strategic initiatives, marketing's got its mandates, based on what you're trying to accomplish and the complexity of the business and the market that you're focused on. You have to then invest your dollars. You have to allocate your budget dollars in such a way that's in service of that business strategy. Some companies, super easy, right? 2X, we focus on B2B organizations, mid-market enterprise, headquarters in the US. And so for us, I don't need to think about marketing, the implication of marketing in 9 different languages in 19 countries, right? I don't have that complexity. A couple companies or adventures ago, I absolutely had that complexity. And looking at the investment that the company is willing to make in marketing, it couldn't do all things. Marketing couldn't be all things to all people, and so we had to figure out the highest impact investments there.
That also, I mean, there goes the, as you're brought into the role and you scale your career in marketing, anyways, in leadership, there's certain things that you aren't taught. You are learned on the job. Some of those things is, hey, we want to go into a new market. Great. How does this translate? Does our brand translate to that company, like to that country? Are we said something, the word that we have, does it translate well? Oh, maybe not. Okay, we got to rethink that. Hey, what does the market actually look like? How are we going to get paid? If they are in a different currency and then let's say you are billing in USD, well, how do they respond to that? Well, oh, you know what? We didn't think about that. Hey, have we considered, there's all these things that are considered of like, do you have the right payment process or are the right processes there? Hey, as you're going, if you're ISO 27001, is all the documentation in that language? There's all these things that are learned on the job.
Yeah, 100%. And normally you learn as you step on the landmines. That's the other thing, right? So, one of the cases I mentioned earlier, we found out that the company name in that language was Lighthouse. Like, oh, Lighthouse. Okay, so now we had to get pretty creative about how we would tie anything like that imagery, that positioning, how we would tie the meaning somehow into the company's narrative. Like, Lighthouse, where did that come from? Secondly, another scenario, I distinctly remember one country we were operating in, we could not do business as the company because there was already someone that had trademarked that in-language version of that name in that country. And so we're like, all right, so now we have to do business as, there's a lot of complexity. Yeah. Even something as simple as in APAC region, you might, as a marketer, think, well, I need to localize and translate content for these countries in these 2 languages. Well, one of those languages has 19 dialects. Go ahead and try to figure out QA of anything that goes to market when you realize you've got 19 dialects within that one language. It's a big yarn ball. You have to unwind. And again, the peanut butter is only going to go so thin. If a company is spending 5% or 3% or 7% on marketing, and the company is global in its footprint, the complexities, it's that bloat that actually is what's going to diminish marketing's ability to be impactful.
And to throw a totally other wrench into the whole thing is you have the way that people communicate, high context societies versus low context societies, and how they translate and what the information is and how they interact with each other. Are you more direct? Are you more casual? What does that look like? You have to think about the marketing and the language you're using to them. There's a lot of complexity, and especially in our restructure of trying to, I will say, get it right is maybe I'm oversimplifying, but getting it right to try to get all these in together, drive the boat in the right direction. Everybody's got the oar. We're all pulling in the same direction. This is what we're doing. It's not simple.
No, it's regulations. And, when you think about GDPR as an example, or you think about social media is a weird one. There are certain countries that have their own set of social media platforms that in order for you to have access to it, you have to have a person in seat in that country. So it's, again, all these little landmines you step on and you learn from experience that you do your best to try to share it with others so that they make smarter decisions faster.
Agree. And I like to say simple is very hard. And when something just looks so simple, there's so much work that goes into the background to try to make it operate or look just so simple. Because anything that you see, well, I don't want to say anything, but you take the Olympics as a really good example, and you say, oh, well, that person's just doing, long track speed skating, isn't well, it doesn't look that hard. Yeah, okay. Look
Yeah.
at the number of hours and things that goes into it just to make it look like that and make it look so effortless. That's the challenge. So,
Years
Lisa,
ago,
oh
I
yeah.
had a mentor that told me if you can explain it simply, you know it well enough. If you
Mm.
cannot explain it simply to someone for the first time, then you don't know it well enough.
And I got to think that that's important when, especially in a restructure and aligning everything together, of the language being so simple that it was like, yeah, makes sense. Let's just do that.
100%. Yeah.
I just looked at the time and I said I'd get you out of here. And this has been a lot of fun. I'm sure we could talk for hours, Lisa. But as we go towards the wrap up, I like to say everybody likes new and nobody likes different. And when you do both at the same time, it can either cause friction or uncertainty. And especially in a restructure, this couldn't maybe be more factual. If somebody's going into a restructure and they're trying to align sales and marketing, what are two or three actionable things that you say, hey, do these two or three things on Monday morning and it'll put you on the right path?
Well, if you sense that you're not aligned or if you're worrying about it, ask. So that goes back to that survey. You don't necessarily need my survey, but you ask some questions and better understand exactly where there might be misalignment. So get to it. Don't just wing it or make any assumptions. You might be surprised. Number two, dig in and kind of reach across the aisle, recognizing that I never lead with negative intention. So when it comes to marketing and sales, I believe everyone's doing what they think is the right thing for the business and for our customers. And so if sales isn't or if marketing's not reaching across the aisle to partner with you, be the one that reaches or extends it. It's almost like that saying about good marriages. Sometimes someone's doing 10%, the other person might be doing 90%. Do the 90% and attempt to bring them together. Like go out of your way to be a great partner, even when it appears that they may not be doing the same. Um, and if you need help with motivation in doing that, just think your job is to represent the customer, which I think brings me to the third piece. If marketing and sales are misaligned, the easiest way to get an organization to get aligned is to anchor to a clear picture of how the customers buy. So if you can kind of map out the reality for customers' buying journey and say, I want to do whatever is right for the organization to make that buying journey as frictionless and painless as possible. What does that look like and who does what? Like, how can marketing support that? What should sales be doing? How do we align around that? Which is always in service of selling more faster. So that's
I
where I
like
would.
I like that. I can't remember who said it, and I don't want to misrepresent, but somebody said attach yourself to a PO and follow the bouncing ball and see where the friction is, and it'll be amazing what you learn.
You'll see it. And
Yeah.
by the way, once I call that the wall of shame. You shine a line on, you find the worst possible case example of where somebody clearly the organization appeared to go out of its way to make it hard for that customer. Shine the light on it, put all the details of that scenario on the wall and say, no finger pointing, let's just do better.
Mhm.
Nobody ever wants that to continue. No one ever wants that to continue because, the easiest thing, we know what it feels like. So yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
Well, this has been so much fun, Lisa. I think feel like we could talk for hours. If somebody listening is like, you know what, I want to talk to Lisa some more or learn, where would you suggest they find you?
There's two ways. LinkedIn, so Lisa Cole 01 and LinkedIn. And that's, conceptually, if you wanted to ask any questions about anything that we talked about here or any of the concepts in the books that we reference. If you need help actually getting marketing and sales aligned and scaling up for greater impact, meaning scale up growth in a predictable, sustainable way, you can also go to 2x.com. So www.2x.com. And happy to help anyway.
Awesome. we if Lisa and I we didn't know each other going into this, and I've got to have one 30-minute conversation, which I think probably could have gotten a lot longer, and I think even today we probably could have got a lot longer, and maybe there's a second episode in here. Lisa, this has been a lot of fun to learn from you, and a lot of the things that you were talking about is alignment and the language, and how do you look at things, and I really like you said is like treat your role like the business,
Yeah,
and carry on. So thank you for doing this. It's been a lot of fun, and I appreciate you spending time with me today.
it was great spending time. Thank you for the opportunity, and have a great day.
Thank you. That's going to wrap up another episode of the Revenue Problem Solvers podcast. Obviously, want to thank Lisa for sharing these incredibly invaluable insights. There's some strategies you clearly hear that you can put into action tomorrow. Remember, success leaves clues, and every revenue problem has a solution. Sometimes you just need the right conversation to find it. Till next time, it's Carl with the Revenue Problem Solvers, helping you turn your obstacles into your opportunities. Thank you for investing your time with us today. We'll see you on the next episode.